Hey guys, we're ready for our last sticky note lecture for chapter 3. Okay, you should be starting on page 73 in your book where it says, right after the checkpoint questions, where it says ecosystems respond to disturbance. Okay, so we talked about how energy moves through ecosystems, we talked about how matter moves through ecosystems, and now we're going to talk about what happens when something disastrous goes wrong and things are dying and maybe there's a fire or maybe there's like a new predator or all kinds of things that could cause a disturbance, okay? And then we're going to talk about how exactly ecosystems are going to respond to those disturbances, okay? So first, what the heck is a disturbance? It's an event caused by physical, chemical, or biological agents that results in a change. That's what that triangle means. It's the letter delta from the Greek alphabet, but it's a simplified way to say change. Okay, it results in change in population size or community composition. Okay, now these disturbances can be long-term or short-term, but we want to know what are the impacts and what are the effects. Okay, so a few words in here that might be confusing. Agents, that's basically whatever is going to be bringing about the disturbance. Okay, so it's not like 007 or anything like that. It's like a biological agent would be something that's living, a chemical agent would be something that's chemical, and a physical agent would be like an earthquake or something that was created by the earth. Okay, or like a natural disaster or something. So there are two kinds of disturbances that we're going to talk about. The first one is natural disturbances, and some examples of those are hurricanes, ice storms, tornadoes, volcanoes, forest fires. Okay, and then anthropogenic. Remember, anthropogenic should be similar to anthropology in your brain, which means that it's human caused. So human settlements, we know, especially if you watch Pocahontas, that when humans come and settle the land, they cut down all the trees and they move the land around and they build their houses, and then at that point, where is everything else supposed to live, right? We create agriculture, so again, we're clearing the land and putting fertilizer and tractors and all kinds of things on the land. Air pollution coming from our cars, factories, all sorts of areas. Clear cutting, which are kind of related to these first two here, and then mining. Okay, mining, going down, digging large holes in the ground and getting everything out of there. Okay, so if we turn the page here, we can see that our first YouTube video, our supplemental video here, is going to be about disturbance. Okay, and our next big topic is going to be watershed studies. So what the heck is a watershed? Okay, we have a picture of it here. Okay, it's basically all of this land that's being diverted into this river. So if it rains anywhere in this watershed, all of that water is going to eventually get to that river. So that's going to be this river's watershed. It's all of this land. Okay? So our official APES definition of watershed is going to be all of the land. Remember, it's land, it's not water. Okay, all of the land in a given landscape that drains into a particular stream, lake, or wetland. So for example, the Mississippi River watershed in the United States is one of the biggest ones in the world. It covers over half of the United States. So whenever it rains in Maine, whenever it rains in Michigan, whenever it rains in Mississippi, all of that water is eventually going to flow down, 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 thanks to the mountains and stuff like that, all into the Mississippi River. Okay, so here's another case study that we're going to talk about today. So, and it's called Hubbard Brook. Okay, and Hubbard Brook was in, let's see, where is it in? New Hampshire. Okay, so if you're ever, and that was a good idea that I had. Like, if you're confused about what your sticky notes say, you might want to just like lift them up and say, oh, let me read this small section and make sure that I get all the information from it. Okay, because that's what I did. I read these sections and I made these sticky notes. Okay, and at some point this year, that's going to be your job. Okay, is to read the section and to write the sticky notes. Okay, so they studied this Hubbard Brook in New Hampshire for over 50 years. And they wanted to see what the effect of clear cutting was on this ecosystem, on this watershed. Okay? And they also wanted to figure out how the plant growth was being suppressed. Okay, and suppressed means like if I'm going to suppress this sticky note, I'm not going to let it get up. Okay, so that they did the same thing with plants there. Okay, so they clear cut it like this, and then they wanted to see how fast does everything grow, what's happening with the soil. And what they found was that there was an increased nitrate concentration in the brook, so in the water, whenever there was no plants. Okay, so their conclusion was that without plants, nutrients will pass through a system. Okay, so just like rain, if it rains over here, okay, anything that's in the rain is just going to pass straight through into the river. And if you notice that the river is kind of brown, that's because there's no plants that's holding onto the soil, so it's turning the river brown. Okay, so it rains, the soil comes in, everything related to the soil comes in, and that soil can't hold on to the nutrients anymore. Okay, so not only are we having like erosion problems over here, but we're also having like a degradation of our soil so that things are not going to be able to grow back as fast. Okay, and this one is the control. This was the one that they didn't mess with. It's just the one that they wanted to compare their data to. Okay, so there's two words that we're going to use in response to disturbance of ecosystems. Okay, the first one is going to be resistance. So how much can a disturbance affect energy and matter flow? Okay, so how resistant is it? Okay, like for some people, they're resistant to certain diseases. Like for example, I'm a teacher, so I'm resistant to a lot of like cold and flu bugs because I've been exposed to them so much that my body naturally knows how to fight against it. Okay? So it can affect the species, but like when I use myself as an example, but resistant mostly is going to be referring to the energy and matter flow throughout the system. Okay? So the nitrates and the food chain and everything that goes along with what we've been studying here in Chapter 3. If an ecosystem is resistant, that means that something's going to have a hard time messing it up. Okay? Then the other word we're going to use is this resilience. Okay? And that's going to be the rate at which an ecosystem returns to its original state. And I gave us an example here because I feel that's the best way to think about this. So for example, a severe drought wipes out an ecosystem. Okay, kind of like the severe flood wiped out the 900 wing of Harrison High School. If it returns to normal the next year, that means it has high resilience. So the fact that we were able to return the 900 wing back to where it kind of looked like before, that means it had high resilience. It was easy to get it back to where it's supposed to be. Now, if it took like 100 years to get it back the way it's supposed to be, then that would be low resilience. Okay, so resistance is before anything happens. Okay, how much is it going to allow of a disturbance, and resilience is how fast can it go back to normal. Okay. Now we have these two ideas called restoration ecology and the intermediate disturbance hypothesis. Two very, very, very important concepts. Okay, so restoration ecology is probably one of my favorite things. If I went to work in the environmental field, I would want to work in restoration. Okay, which is basically restoring damaged ecosystems and restoring original function. So for example, the Florida Everglades, people were moving in, people were destroying this land, and so what groups of individuals can then do is come in and say, hey, we are going to take this land, we are going to protect it, we're going to make sure nobody can build their houses on it, and we're going to restore it back to its original function, which in the Everglades case is mostly, it's a wetland, so it's going to be filtering water. Okay, and then Chesapeake Bay, we had a bunch of invasive species going on there, and we wanted to make sure that it's going back to its original purpose. Okay, and it's more native species, which those kind of like Native Americans, they were there before everybody else. Okay, now anthropogenic disturbances can destroy entire ecosystems, and so when it's destroyed the entire thing, it's going to be very, very hard to restore it. Okay, but when there's just a few pieces missing, then restoration efforts are going to be much more manageable. Okay, so ways that people can destroy entire ecosystems: housing developments like the suburbs, clear cutting forests, and draining of wetlands. So people can drain this wetland because, oh, I want to build a mall here or whatever you want to build here, but I can't have the standing water. They're going to drain it. Well, what about all the organisms that live in here? What are they going to do? Okay, they're basically going to leave or they're going to die. Okay. Now, scientists have this intermediate disturbance hypothesis, which means ecosystems with intermediate levels of disturbance are the most diverse or more diverse than those with high or low disturbance levels. So that's really easy to see on this graph. Okay, over here we have number of species. Over here we have disturbance, so between infrequent and frequent disturbances. Okay, now the reason that this is the highest in the middle is because in the case of rare disturbance, like if they're not disturbed, they're only disturbed every 100 years. Like every 100 years, someone comes in with their blowtorches and burns up the forest. Okay, if that's the only thing that's disturbing it, there's going to be intense species competition. Okay, which means that like the fastest growing trees are going to grow the fastest, and so they're going to get all of the light, and then all of the other trees that are a little bit slower to grow, they're going to be killed off because they don't have enough sunlight for photosynthesis. Okay, so very few species will eventually dominate. Okay. In the case of frequent disturbance, like there's a fire twice a year, the population growth rate must be high. Okay, so things must grow back really, really fast. We must have really high resilience because we're going to have to keep dealing with these disturbances over and over again. Okay, so the growth rate's going to have to be high to deal with the fact that it's going to be, you know, disturbed or cut down every year. Okay. They want to just counter the disturbance, like I said, and they want to prevent extinction. Okay, so only the species that grow fast and are the largest are going to survive in the rare disturbances, and only the species that grow the fastest in order to reproduce every year are going to survive the frequent disturbance. So we have like this happy medium where we are going to have a lot of different kinds of species in something that's only disturbed every so often. Okay. Here's some of our checkpoint questions. And next we have ecosystems provide valuable services. Okay, so you're going to hear that term ecosystem services a bunch this year. This is kind of an introduction to it. Okay, and then we're going to come back to this a bunch. So what are ecosystems doing for us as people? Okay, because as people we're kind of selfish, and we want to make sure that leaving a forest intact is going to be the best thing for us and the best thing for the forest. Okay, so we can classify ecosystems into having two different kinds of value. They can have instrumental value or intrinsic value. So the instrumental value is how much is it worth as an instrument or as a tool that can be used to accomplish a goal. So usually it's a goal for money, like timber, we can cut it down and we can make money from it, or human health. Lots of different drugs are based on plants, like medicinal drugs. So without these plants, we wouldn't have a lot of the medicines we have today. All right, and then intrinsic value is going to be worth that is independent of any benefit it may provide to humans. So either you have like a moral obligation to protect these ecosystems, or you have kind of a love of nature, and that's the reason that you want to protect it. All right, so these ecosystem services, benefits that humans obtain from natural ecosystems. For example, agriculture ecosystem produces food, means happy people. A wetland ecosystem filters water, again, makes happy people. Researchers predict that these services to people are worth approximately $30 trillion a year. Okay, which was basically the entire global monetary economy in 1997. So basically, what is ecosystems doing for us that we couldn't do ourselves, or that we would have to pay people to do ourselves, that we're basically getting for free because it just grows outside? Okay, so that's an ecosystem service. First are these provisions. Provisions are goods that humans can use directly, like lumber, food crops, medicinal plants, okay, natural rubber, and furs. Okay, a couple fun facts. 70% of U.S. prescriptions are from natural sources, which is really cool. Taxol is an anti-cancer drug from a Pacific yew tree, okay, which is right here, this yew tree, which produces about $1 billion in revenue. Okay, so this tree, when we cut it down and we get the drug out of it, or we manufacture the drug out of it, it's making us billions of dollars. Okay, now the question is, what other drug plants could be discovered? We have not discovered every plant in the world, so what are we missing out? Like when we're cutting down an acre of rainforest every single day or every single second, what are we losing? Okay, and that's something that we need to keep in mind. Next, we have regulating services. So ecosystems help to regulate environmental conditions. So we know that we've been talking about carbon a lot with our carbon cycle. So for examples, humans add 8 gigatons, yeah, the G stands for gigatons, of carbon into the atmosphere per year. Okay, and 1 gigaton is 1 trillion kilograms. Okay, now half remains there thanks to carbon sinks like super old forests and oceans and organisms. So with how much carbon that we're producing every year, we need a way to filter it out. And so these regulating services are like rainforests and the ocean and other ecosystems that are going to be filtering out the carbon dioxide from the air and storing it somewhere, because that's what a sink is. A sink is like a storage area of the earth. Okay, next we have support systems. Okay, support systems are going to be ecosystems provide support services that would be costly for humans to generate. So this would be stuff that would take way too much time and money for humans to do themselves, but luckily ecosystems kind of take care of it for us. Okay, so for example, the biggest example is going to be pollination. Okay, down here this bee is doing some pollinating. Okay, bees, insects, hummingbirds, and bats save us about $3.1 billion in paying people to do it, because if people have to pollinate, they take a Q-tip, like the kind that you use in your ears, and they would just touch the flower and then touch another flower over here and over here, touch this one over here. Okay, hours, okay, of really like monotonous work. But luckily we have these fabulous organisms that can help do it for us. Okay, we just have to protect these species because bees are on the decline, and we need to figure out how we can save them and save ourselves $3.1 billion. Okay, we also have natural pest control thanks to our good friends the spiders. We have water filtration like in the wetlands. For example, New York City draws water from the natural Catskills Reservoir, but now humans are polluting it. So New York City is a very large city. We need to have a lot of people have a lot of clean water. So how are we going to get it if we keep polluting this reservoir? All right. So, I mean, that's always the question. How do we balance nature and people? Okay, and next here we have our word resilience again. Okay, that's an ecosystem service. So this ensures an ecosystem will continue to exist in its current state. Okay, so the longer a beneficial ecosystem remains there, the continued human benefits, the longer we have these benefits, the happier we are as people, and the more that we're going to be allowed to leave these natural ecosystems alone. Okay, so for example, if many species perform similar functions in an ecosystem and one is wiped out due to pollution or disease, the others that perform the same function can pick up the slack. Okay, this happens a lot in nitrogen fixing plants because we need nitrogen fixers because we don't want to have a ton of nitrogen in the air. Okay, so this is going to be an example of species diversity. So we want to have a lot of different kinds of plants that do the same job. So lots of different kinds of plants that fix nitrogen would be great, because in case one species gets killed off, the rest of them can kind of pick up the slack. In the case of the banana that you guys eat, that you can get at the supermarket, the species diversity of the bananas are so low now that if a disease comes around, we're not going to be able to save any of our bananas. Okay, so the estimation is that bananas will be around for about 50 more years, and then some disease is going to come along and just kill them all off because they're all exactly the same genetically. Okay, so species diversity and resilience to when they get disturbed are very, very, very important. Okay, now we have two more. We have cultural services. So cultural or aesthetic value for which people are willing to pay. So if you've ever been to a national park, that's a cultural service. Okay, people are willing to pay to go there to camp, and let's see a wolf, let's see a bear, let's go on a safari and see some awesome lions. Okay, so scientific studies, a lot of scientific studies on natural areas are done at natural parks, and the money that you spend at a natural park usually goes back into the science for research and gaining knowledge, and then of course educating the public. We want to explore biodiversity, so we want to see exactly how many species we have, exactly what they're doing. We want to discover new species. We want to bring back endangered species, all kinds of that kind of thing. And then we want to do studies on invasive species. How are invasive species affecting the natural species, and what can we do to get them out of here, okay, so that they stop. And the last one is going to be our intrinsic value. Again, valuable, independent of any benefit to humans. Some land is holy, so we have like religious or philosophical areas that we have to maintain. Some people have moral obligations to protect the ecosystem, so they feel very, very strongly about the earth and kind of view it as more of a source of nourishment than something to be used for money. And usually the people who believe strongly in intrinsic value, they don't deny that there is instrumental value, they just don't believe it to be more important. So some people out there still feel like nature is more valuable than the money that it can give us. Okay, so it doesn't matter what your opinion is right now. We're going to talk about, maybe you care a lot about the earth, maybe you don't. Maybe you care about money, maybe you don't. We'll talk about that a lot as we go through this year, and then I'll be interested to see what you guys say at the end. All right, so this is our last lecture for chapter 3. Very excited about getting it done. Make sure all your guided reading is done. Make sure your sticky notes are done, and I will see you tomorrow for a quiz.